No DQ Galaxy, we are live with a recap of AEW Dynamite for Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. My dad would have been 71 today. Somewhat of a bittersweet day, but thank you all for tuning in tonight. I appreciate your viewership and support. This show, Dynamite, was in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and we had the two Owen Hart tournament final matches. The first one was Bryan Danielson versus Adam Page, but before that, we kicked off the show with footage from last week and over the weekend, AEW Collision, MJF explaining his actions, why he turned against Daniel Garcia. Then we had Will Ospreay, the international champion, come into the ring for a promo. Will Ospreay said that Daniel Garcia doesn't know when he'll be back, if he'll be back. Ospreay brought up how MJF is suffering from ADD. Ospreay said he has ADHD, and that doesn't give him an excuse to be a prick. Ospreay thinks that maybe because the 2024 bidding war didn't go MJF's way, since Tony Khan decided to spend his money on guys that want to elevate AEW rather than bury it. Then Ospreay said that he has more talent in his left nut than MJF does in his entire body. And he called MJF a selfish prick. Ospreay then called out MJF, but of course MJF did not come out there. Instead, he appeared on the big screen. He called Ospreay a flavor of the month. MJF said he doesn't have to murder himself to get people to react. All he has to do is talk. He's been in the business for 10 years and he's seen 10 guys like Ospreay come and go. He did have a proposition, though. He would face Ospreay next week in an international title match, and said that instead of competing for stars, like 5 stars, 6 stars, Ospreay will be seeing stars when MJF beats the hell out of him. And that match was officially accepted by Ospreay. It will take place next week on the 250th episode of Dynamite. That's coming up next week in Little Rock, Arkansas. I wonder if TJS will go to that show. Now, I'm a little surprised they're doing this on Dynamite next week, but I have a feeling I know where this is going. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. We had our first match of the evening, which was Bryan Danielson versus Hangman Adam Page in the first of the 2 Owen Hart tournament finals. This one was for the men. A long match. I think it got like 3 commercial breaks. It took up most of the first hour. Bryan was selling his neck. Page was dominating a good part of the match. He was driving Bryan's head into the exposed turnbuckle at one point, driving Bryan's head into the steel steps. Bryan was busted open. Bryan was bleeding, and Bryan kept fighting, though. I should note that Jeff Jarrett was the special guest enforcer for this match. He was sitting up on the stage, and at one point, officials and Jeff Jarrett were checking on Bryan. He was in rough shape. He got a pile driver on the floor, and Page actually went over and shoved Jeff Jarrett, but Jarrett kept his composure. Match continued. Page ripped off Bryan's neck tape, but Bryan made his comeback. He's Bryan Daniel. He's resilient. He hit the running knee and then went for a second one, but the referee accidentally got hit. So Jeff Jarrett came down there And Paige was not happy with this. Jarrett was shoved to the ground. So Jarrett took off his shirt and revealed that he had a referee's shirt on. Bryan recovered. Match continued to go back and forth. Paige did hit the buckshot lariat. He went for another one, but Bryan was able to avoid it. Paige tried to win the match with a crossface using a belt. Jarrett raised Bryan's arm to see if he was out, but Bryan kept fighting, kept his arm up, and then Bryan countered Paige's submission and got the 1-2-3 victory. Bryan Danielson picks up the win and goes on to All In to challenge Swerve Strickland for the World Heavyweight Championship. So we got the feel-good win. This is Bryan's last match. Well, one of his last matches of his full-time run. He's supposed to be ending it this year. He'll just be a part-timer after this year. Could be his last opportunity to become the AEW World Champion at Wembley Stadium. This was a really good match. And we'll see if Paige gets another match at some point. Remember, we got All Out coming up 2 weeks after All In. And depending on what happens here, Paige could always get one more crack at the World Heavyweight title. And I agree with Matthew. Good usage of Jeff Jarrett. It was like a pay-per-view quality match. It was a long match, but it was the Owen Hart tournament final to determine the All-In opponent. So I really had no problem with the match length. Really good stuff here with these guys. Then we had the world champion, Swerve Strickland, come into the ring for a promo. He hyped up how he is the best in the world now. He did congratulate Bryan, but Swerve said he still has a grudge because Bryan has a victory over him. And in addition to Bryan, Swerve had a couple other things he wanted to get off his chest. He did confirm that he will be the team captain for AEW against the Elite coming up in 2 weeks, Blood and Guts. And he's going to do the two things Bryan could not do. One, which he already did, beat Will Ospreay. And then number two, go on to lead Team AEW to victory because, of course, Bryan's team did not get the job done at Double or Nothing in the Stadium Stampede, or Anarchy in the Arena, excuse me. And the last thing, Swerve challenged Okada to a singles match, and it was confirmed for next week, episode 250. Swerve will go one-on-one with Okada, another big match they're giving away on Dynamite. They're stacking next week's Dynamite. I mean, we are getting not one but two pay-per-view quality matches next week. MJF versus Ospreay, which is crazy to me, giving that away on Dynamite, but I suspect there will be shenanigans. And then we got Swerve versus Okada, another match they could have potentially put on a pay-per-view. We had a Max Caster rap video to hype up the Elite versus the Acclaimed for the titles. I guess it's better than the live promos because if you screw up, it's pre-recorded, you know? And it was entertaining for what it was. We then had Samoa Joe versus the Learning Tree Chris Jericho in a Stadium Stampede match, which was basically just a hardcore match. Jericho had a bag of horseshoes, and they did some spots with the horseshoes. Jericho ended up being slammed on the horseshoes. Then after the commercial break, they fought in the crowd. And I do have a little bit of nitpicking. So Jericho puts on the walls of Jericho before they start fighting in the crowd, and we go to a commercial. And to me, this is like the worst time to go to a commercial. I know it's picture in picture, but still, I'm conditioned to think, okay, picture in picture means I can take a break. Like they're not going to do anything significant. Why would you go to a commercial during the walls of Jericho when, you know, in kayfabe, the match could potentially end? Like, why not do it during a down period when the match is clearly not going to end yet? Just a little bit of nitpicking, I guess. So they fight in the crowd, and then they fight in the backstage area, and Jericho throws hot coffee in Joe's face, but Jericho ends up being put in the coquina clutch. Joe gets it together. However, we have Big Bill attacking Samoa Joe with a steel chair, and it was noted that Hook was not there, and neither was Shibata, so Joe had no backup. At least they explained that. Big Bill attacked Joe, choke slammed him on a forklift, and then Jericho got in the forklift with Joe on it, and Jericho drove the forklift into a wall, which was a wall they built for the spot. It was like a styrofoam wall, some kind of cheap material. But they acted like Jericho attempted to murder Samoa Joe. And the referee, in fact, called off the match, and Jericho was declared the winner. And Samoa Joe, the big badass Samoa Joe, ended up being taken out in an ambulance. This could be a turning point with Chris Jericho, like he was doing the comedy with the "hi guys," but now it feels like it's a little bit more moving in a serious direction with Jericho. I enjoyed the angle, the wall, like it was a little unbelievable that Joe would be seriously hurt from that, but whatever. I'm gonna let it slide. I think maybe the Jericho change in character could be a good thing. I'll give it time and see where it goes. Shout out to Caleb AJ, who sent in a $2.20 super chat. Thank you, Caleb. I appreciate it. Says, what a way to cap off Bryan Danielson's career. Congrats. Well, his full-time career. He said he's going to be wrestling, but he's going to cut back after this year. We got all in, we got all out, and keep in mind, Wrestle Dream is in Seattle, and that could be Bryan's last full-time match. It's gonna be a fun couple months here for Bryan. I'm sure he's gonna hold nothing back in these last couple matches. Tacoma, Washington, so basically Seattle. We had our next segment, which was a four-way match, a number one contenders match for the international title. Claudio versus Kyle Fletcher versus Pac versus Ishii. And, well, it was an entertaining match. At one point, three guys were going after Ishii, and he was fighting them off, so he got his chance to shine in this. And then Claudio did the big swing to Fletcher, put on the sharpshooter, which, I mean, we were in Calgary, but that's one of Claudio's moves. Pac also put on the brutalizer to Fletcher while the sharpshooter was on Fletcher. Ishii had to break it up, but then Ishii was sent out of the ring. Pac built up some momentum, got rid of Claudio, and then Pac was able to finish off Fletcher with the Black Arrow, followed by the brutalizer. Now, Pac gets a future international title match. They did not say when, but here's the thing. I was talking about MJF and Ospreay earlier. So Pac cut this promo after the match, said it's all in season, and the bastard will not be denied his Wembley moment. Here's what I think is going to happen. Next week, Daniel Garcia is going to interfere in that match, and Will Ospreay will retain his title, and it will be Will Ospreay versus Pac at Wembley Stadium. So Pac gets his big moment at Wembley. He did not get to compete last year, and then it will be Daniel Garcia versus MJF at All In. I would have rather seen Ospreay versus MJF at All In, but They want to give Pac his big moment. I'm thinking that's what's going to happen, Matthew. I hate to say it, but I'm thinking Garcia returns next week. They're acting like there's no way he's going to make it, but he's going to show up, and this is going to be AEW's attempt to really strap the rocket to, I'm not talking about Owen Hart, rest in peace, but strapping the rocket to Daniel Garcia and taking him to the next level. It is what it is, and we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. But that's my prediction as to what happens. Backstage, Adam Page stormed to the Elite's locker room. Okada answered, but then the Bucks were right behind him, and Page had a simple message. He said, and I quote, "I'll do it," meaning he will join the Elite in the Blood and Guts match, which makes sense because this is his way to get his hands on Swerve. He's not going to be able to fight for the title, but if he's in Blood and Guts, he can get a piece of Swerve Strickland. At least that makes sense. I give him credit for that. We had Mercedes Monae come into the ring for another celebration. She gave a shout out to the Bucks for providing security. She said she won't be interrupted this time. She got some heat in Calgary by calling herself the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. And then she said that Britt Baker will not be getting a match for the championship, the TBS title, at All In. Because if they had a match, Mercedes said, and I quote, "I will leave her for dead, bitch." I will leave you for dead, bitch, is what she said. She had a toast. Britt Baker then interrupted, of course. She beat up the security, of course, and Mercedes Moné took off. It was a solid segment, predictable, but I didn't have too many issues with it. I like Mercedes using that line. Am I the only one that thought maybe we were going to see Natalya show up? Like, I know Natalya is apparently a free agent now. This would have been an interesting place to debut her, but no Natalya yet. Time will tell if she shows up in AEW, or maybe WWE will sign her to a new deal. I guess we'll have to wait and see. And yes, they do say the word bitch a lot. A lot of wrestlers like to use that word, just like we get a lot of blood in AEW. So we had our main event, Mariah May versus Willow Nightingale in the women's Owen Hart tournament final. And it was a back and forth competitive match. Mariah May tried to finish off Willow with the hip attack and a DDT. Willow kicked out of that. Willow started to build up momentum. She attempted a sharpshooter, but Mariah was able to escape. And then you had Willow going for the pounce, but Mariah countered with a headbutt. And then Willow got up. She recovered from that. But then Stokely Hathaway and Chris Statlander interfered, and they took their cheap shot. Mariah May hit a knee strike, but no. Willow kicked out of that. And then Mariah tried to use the move she beat Hikaru Shida with in a tournament match. But once again, Willow kicked out. And then Willow made a comeback, hit the cannonball, went to finish off Mariah with a Michinoku driver. But Mariah countered it into a pin and got the win to officially win the Owen Hart tournament and get a title match with Toni Storm. Not a surprise here. Figured Mariah May would win. The surprise was as they went up the ramp, they were celebrating, and then all of a sudden, Mariah May turned against her friend, her alleged friend, Toni Storm, hit her with the championship belt, and attacked Luther, knocked Luther off the stage. Luther crashed through a table or two tables. Wasn't sure if it was one or two. It might have been two. And then used the shoe on Toni Storm, repeatedly hit her in the head with the shoe. Toni Storm was bleeding. And yeah, this was a fantastic angle to end the show. One of the best angles that we've seen in the women's division for AEW. They closed the show with a heavy angle. Mariah May turning against Toni Storm, who's basically been a babyface, even though she's technically been a heel character. She gets cheered for the most part. Yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was a fantastic angle. And yeah, Toni Storm definitely a babyface now. What an angle. The only thing, I know they wanted to have the men's match be dramatic, but they did not need to do blood in the opening match. Larry David once said, you don't need 2 fucks, when he was giving advice to Crazy Ice Killer on his rap song. And just like on AEW Dynamite, you don't need 2 angles with blood on the same show. I think if Bryan had not bled, this angle would have had just a little bit more impact. My own opinion, I know it's nitpicking, but I wouldn't have done it twice. Bryan is such a great seller that he didn't need the blood. Like, he's selling his neck, and you wonder, is this guy really hurt? Like, he does such a great job with that. They didn't need blood. It was unnecessary, especially on the same show. You're going to be doing blood in the final angle. That's my nitpicking. I still thought the end was great. And overall, I thought it was another great Dynamite. 2 weeks in a row. I give the show another A-. And one more little bit of nitpicking. Last week, Daniel Garcia was bleeding. So you gotta think about this. Like, you want the blood to be impactful. The reason Cody bleeding when The Rock attacked him meant so much is because we rarely see blood in WWE. They only do it when they want to make a real impact with the angle. But here we had blood last week with MJF and Daniel Garcia, and then we had it twice on this show. Like, you got to pick your spots for it. So that's my mild criticism of the show, but I still thought it was fantastic. They really elevated Mariah May and Toni Storm with this angle. I love that the women actually got the main event spot for this instead of Bryan. That they didn't need it. Give it to the women. I thought that was cool. And yeah, they set up some angles for All In. I mean, I think it's pretty clear it's Mercedes versus Britt Baker. I mean, we got, 5-6 weeks until All In. They got plenty of time to build up to that. They set up Blood and Guts nicely. They set up 250. And of course, they set up All In. Thumbs up for the show. Next week should be a hell of a show. It's 250. And then we got Blood and Guts in 2 weeks. AEW picking up some steam right now. I'm giving them credit. Things are starting to look up as we get into All In. Hopefully they can keep the momentum going, get those ticket sales up for All In, boost the attendance at Wembley Stadium. It's shaping up to be one of AEW's strongest events. So looking forward to it, and hoping for the best that they can get their numbers up. Thank you guys for watching tonight. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube and tell a friend about the NoDQ.com website and YouTube channel. I will see you guys Friday night after SmackDown with the recap. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Take care. Buy a shirt like this one over on NoDQ.com/merch. Say yes to NoDQ, and I will see you all next time.